Give them a nice round of applause. Your candidates for Congress. So, thank you all for being here. You all look great. How nice is the staging? It's really beautiful. So, the way this is going to work is I'm going to ask all of you the same question, and everybody gets a minute. And please try to stay to that minute. And our friend Dre here has got time reminders, and if you are obnoxious about it, I will cut you off because we want to be respectful and get to as many of these topics as possible. If a candidate is name checked, then they will get 30-second rebuttal to respond to that. So that's another option as well. And if I feel like somebody didn't answer a question, I have the right to do a rebuttal or a follow-up to try to make sure that we get your answer. So with that, let's get started. And I think just in fairness, in alphabetical order, we'll go down the line for this first question. And when you start, why don't you introduce yourself, each one of you as well. But the first question is, a lot of you are Democrats. A lot of you vote the same. A lot of members of Congress vote the same. What are we getting different with you? What is the biggest, most important differentiator for you in this seat that folks here can get if you win?
Well, first of all, thank you so much to the Ebell of Los Angeles for hosting us. This is a beautiful theater. Thank you, Elex, for moderating this debate. My name is Francesco Arreaga. I am the youngest candidate on this stage. I'm also a progressive Democrat. And what makes me different from the other candidates on the stage is, one, I was born and raised in this district. I went to public schools here in the district in Los Feliz Elementary, King Middle School, Marshall High School. I'm a local. I know what the community needs. Second, I have lived experiences. I was raised in a working class immigrant household. I know the suffering that so many people in our district are going through, living paycheck to paycheck, barely making ends meet, barely being able to pay for the rent. People are being priced out of our district, so I know those lived experiences. And third, I have experience working in Congress. After graduating from law school at UC Berkeley, I became a legislative advisor in the House of Representatives, and I will bring those experiences as your next member of Congress.
Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, I am Alex Balekian. I am born and raised in the district in Glendale. I'm a practicing physician in the community. I am also an endangered species. I am a pro-choice Republican. I grew up in a fiscally conservative, socially moderate immigrant household, and we were all proud California Duke-Majan Republicans. And what that meant was keep the streets clean, keep the neighborhood safe, stay out of my bank account, stay out of my personal life. I believe a government should maximize the health, wealth, and safety of its citizens as efficiently and inexpensively as possible. I believe we should run this country like we run our own households, on a budget and with minimal interference from outside forces. I want you to leave here pleasantly surprised that you might actually vote for a California Republican this year. So if you want someone who's going to lower your taxes, balance the budget, combat crime and homelessness, and not try to control your personal life like we're at a Sunday school, please vote for me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much to the organizers here at the Ebell, as well as the Largemont Buzz, and thank you so much, Elex, and everyone who's here today. My name's Steve Dunwoody. I'm a veteran, educator, and environmental advocate, where I lead right now the advocacy work of a national climate organization in Washington, D.C. You know, I am a person who was willing to offer something else. We've got experience on this stage. We've got no shortage of different types of skills. But I think what's needed in our district is a vision for the future, a vision that works for everyone, whether we're talking about economic security and affordability, whether we're talking about peace, making sure we feel safe here in our communities, and also in ending the wars overseas. And then also to make sure we protect our democracy, to make sure our votes and voices are heard. I'm working to make sure that we have an America that works for everyone. It's pulled from, my experiences and lived experience, but also to have a vision for our district. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Feuer.
Thanks very much. So, Elex, Adam Schiff has been a consequential national leader, and his successor has to be a proven national leader. I'm the only candidate in this race to have fought authoritarianism and stood up for democracy. I defeated Trump when he tried to make LAPD immigration enforcers as the price of getting public safety funding. When Republicans sought to suppress the vote, I expanded voting rights in California. I took on Wall Street and won, defeating Wells Fargo in that fake account scandal. On gun violence, I've written first in the nation legislation, and I co-founded and co-chaired the nation's first ever coalition of prosecutors to combat gun violence. I have the strongest record on this stage on women's reproductive freedom. I am being strongly supported by Mayor Bass because of my leadership on homelessness. I want to connect the most important issues here on the street to my leadership in Washington, D.C., and have a specific agenda that I hope we'll talk about today. Thank you for that. That proven national leadership is the answer to your question.
Thank you very much. Assemblymember.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for caring enough about your community to come out today. I'm Laura Friedman, and I have been in the state legislature for 8 years, and prior to that, I was a Glendale council member and the mayor of Glendale. I would say that the difference between a lot of us on this stage aren't necessarily the way that we're going to vote, but what we've leaned in on and what we've led on. I'm very proud to have been endorsed very strongly by the LA Times in this race, and that's because I've been unafraid to take on a lot of really big and difficult issues. Issues like housing and homelessness, like how we move around our city and deal with traffic safety and congestion, and I've been effective at doing this. In a state that's considered a leader in the environment in the nation, I'm considered one of the top climate and environmental leaders in California, which is why I've been endorsed by the League of Conservation Voters and every other major environmental group that's endorsed in this race. So the difference is really in that leadership. And lastly, I would say that I would be, if elected, the first woman to ever hold this seat, to ever represent this community in the House of Representatives. And at a time when abortion rights are on the table, it's time that we have women in those leadership positions.
Thank you very much.
Hey everybody, thank you so much for having me. My name is Maebe Pudlow, also known as Maebe a Girl. My pronouns are she, her, or they, them. I'm one of only a couple of transgender people running for Congress across the entire United States. This is not my first time running for this seat. I actually ran last year. I came in second place out of 9 candidates. I was the only person here who had the audacity and political courage to run for the seat when it was not an open seat, because I felt as if I was not being represented. My community was not being represented. And I'm running on an intersectional humanitarian platform that includes universal health care, housing for all, environmental justice, tuition-free college, racial justice, LGBTQIA rights, reproductive rights, tenants' rights, labor rights, and staying out of war. And that includes a permanent and humanitarian unconditional ceasefire in Gaza. And that's one of the big things that makes me stand out amongst this crowd.
Nick.
Thank you. Well, thanks so much for coming. It's a real privilege. The last time I was at the Ebell, I was officiating a wedding, and that couple just had their first child. So good vibes here. I'm Nick Melvoin, former public school teacher, attorney, civil rights advocate, and now LA Unified board member. And I so appreciate the question, Alex, because we're really lucky in the 30th District to have a group of leading candidates who are very aligned on the existential threat of climate change, of our democracy, of our civil rights. When I was just endorsed this week by the LA Daily News, they said that I was the candidate most likely to work across lines of difference and bring coalitions together to get stuff done. So I think that's the answer to your question. When I got reelected last year, I had one of the most diverse coalitions supporting me, including the Chamber of Commerce, the County Federation of Labor, the Democratic Party, the LA Times, the Daily News, every living mayor of LA, which included Mayor Reardon, the last Republican mayor. And so I think it's important to work across lines of difference and get stuff done. I also would represent some generational change. I was recently endorsed by Congressman Henry Waxman, who has served this district for a long time, and he said he was supporting me as a bridge to the next generation of leadership in Washington.
Thank you very much. And if you need, apparently he does weddings. Senator Portantino.
I'm State Senator Anthony Portantino, and it's great to be here. Thank you for inviting all of us to be on the stage to talk about the 30th. For me, I think the biggest thing is a sense of collaboration. You don't get things done by using the word I, you get things done by working collaboratively, and I like to say there are I politicians and we politicians. And I collaborated with the governor on SB 2, which rewrote California's concealed carry permitting law in the Attorney General's office as well. I worked with the Decoding Dyslexia in UC San Francisco to make sure that every first grader in California gets screened for dyslexia. When you work collaboratively, you can get things done, and that's been the hallmark of my career. I think the other difference is I'm a community guy. I've been an AYSO soccer referee for 20 years. I'm a PTA member. My wife is a PTA member. I'm proud to receive the Honorary Service Award from about 6 different PTAs in my district because they recognize my commitment to kids. They recognize my commitment to making sure that the next generation has the opportunities that the past generation. And then finally, we all check the same boxes. I can tell you why I check every one of those boxes, and I hope to do that during this forum today. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much. Hi, everybody. My name is Jirair Ratevosian. My story is deeply rooted in the promise of the American dream. For the last 20 years, I've worked to support progressive policies to help individuals get out of homelessness and promote peace and prosperity and global development around the world. And I've worked on the Hill for Congresswoman Barbara Lee, for the State Department, and I stood with President Biden during America's darkest chapter, fighting COVID and fighting Trump. With me, you'll get someone who has the most federal government experience and the lived experience to truly represent the diversity of this district and represent them in an effective way in Congress. The reason why I'll sound different than anyone else on this stage today is because I'm Armenian American, I'm gay, I was born and raised in this district, I'm the son of immigrants, I'm a renter, I'm a frustrated student loan borrower, but I'm also a husband and an aspiring father. So for me, these issues are not talking points. They're real issues, and it's a matter of life or death.
Thank you, Mayor. Okay.
And I got a lot of friends. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. My name is Sepi Shyne. I'm the former mayor of the city of West Hollywood and a current council member.
Okay.
I, too, am a product of the American dream. I am an immigrant. I was born in Iran. I was 2 when the revolution happened, and then the war. My family and I fled Iran when I was 5 for the promise of safety and opportunities of America. I am a lesbian. I am a woman of color, a renter, a small business owner. I'm an attorney, but I'm also an energy healer. I bring compassion and empathy in my policymaking. In the past 3 years, we have passed some of the most prolific policies in the city of West Hollywood that has included equity. Safety has increased by 8% since I've been in office. Our businesses are thriving. 2 years in a row, 22 and 23, we had the highest amount of budget surplus of any other city. And so with me at the table, you will have intersectionality and a wonderful record that I hope to bring as a new generation of leaders to Congress.
Thank you very much. And, you know, it takes a lot to put yourself out there, and we're really appreciative of the sacrifices you're all making by doing this as well. So let's get into some of the more specific questions. We'll go down the line, starting with Mr. Balekian on this one. Housing affordability is one of the most, if not the most important issue in California. Real simply, how do we make it more affordable for more Californians to live in California?
So unfortunately, the policies by our elected officials are front and center why housing is so expensive. So we have a lot of environmental regulations, some people would say excessive, that specify the type of double-paned energy efficient window you should use, that say what kind of shingle you should use that's going to make it carbon neutral. So when you have those specific materials to build a house, that house starts out expensive. Also, to repair or remodel a house, you still need to follow those rules. That makes it expensive. That is why insurers, home insurers, have left the state, because it's too expensive to do business here. In addition, we have a 400% increase in the garbage rates in Glendale, a 54% increase in electricity rates. There is this all-electric dogma by our elected officials that is straining our grid and increasing the demand. And all that does is jack up the electricity costs, and those day-to-day home insurance, property tax, electricity bills, that is what's making housing unaffordable.
Thank you very much. Mr. Dunwoody, how do we make it cheaper to live here?
Well, thank you so much for the question. You know, as a renter that lives in Hollywood, I see firsthand what has been happening with the housing crisis that we're in. We need the federal government to get involved in the housing crisis. It needs to play a bigger role. We've got to make sure that we've got enough programs to be able to help people afford a place to stay. The federal government, we had a study here in Los Angeles County that found that a $300 to $500 difference a month would make a difference between someone being unhoused and being able to stay in their home. I want to close that gap with universal basic income. Also, the dream of owning a home just seems so unattainable for people, particularly of my generation. So I want to make sure that we're having the government also help with that first down payment. And those environmental protections are not the cause of the housing crisis. It's developers who are developing housing with greed instead of thinking about what's affordable for everyone. Thank you.
A quick follow-up. How do you pay for universal basic income?
Well, one of the things we need to do with universal basic income is we need to make sure that everyone is able to pay the fair share. First, we've got to roll back the Trump tax cuts. This has been an enormous weight on the deficit. We've also got to, for the richest Americans, top 1%, we've got to make sure we're closing loopholes for the biggest corporations that essentially are paying no tax. And so that's not fair when we have working families and single people paying almost a third of our paychecks in taxes. So we've got to be able to close that. And I think when we do that, we'll have enough financing to be able to support a program like universal basic income.
All right, thank you very much. We'll go now to you, Mr. Feuer. The question of housing affordability, how do you keep people living here?
Yes, thanks, Alex. It's a huge question because all of us want our kids and our grandkids to be able to afford to live nearby too. And when I was on the city council, I co-authored the city's affordable housing trust fund, and then I co-chaired the mayor's committee on that, how to expend that money. So here's what I think as a federal legislator. First, I think the federal government needs to do a much more extensive job of participating in getting bridge financing to affordable housing builders. Steve mentioned he's a renter. We don't have a refundable renter's tax credit at a federal level. We should. Very important for renters to be able to sustain what their day-to-day living is. Next, I think it's really important for first-time home buyers to get a good shot at it. And I think the federal government can do more to create additional funding for low-income first-time home buyers to have a crack at that American dream and creating the generational wealth that so many communities are lacking. Mm-hmm. Then locally, even though I wouldn't have a precise role in this, I think it's really important that every time there is a newly constructed condominium or apartment building, that there's affordable housing in that building. And I think we've wasted too many opportunities to avoid that so far.
Assembly member.
So housing affordability is absolutely one of the biggest crises in Los Angeles, and not just here, but even across the nation. This is something that's being a problem in many of our states and urban centers, and it has a direct connection to homelessness as well. We are seeing right now some of the most affordable options like SROs closing all across Los Angeles. We need to have a national strategy for housing that recognizes housing as a human right, and that has a robust and updated federal policy. We need to make sure that HUD programs like Section 8 actually work, and they don't work enough right now for a lot of our cities and for a lot of our renters, and we don't have enough vouchers available. I'm doing my third piece of legislation right now with Habitat for Humanity. We have a lot of barriers that are in place that prevent people from building for sale product for low income and moderate income individuals. We need to remove those barriers, and we need to have federal and state taxing policies that incentivizes the creation of affordable units. And lastly, stop the speculative buying of single-family homes and mom-and-pop buildings by large hedge funds and other large corporate interests.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Again, my name is Maebe. So I'm currently an elected official with the City of Los Angeles. I serve on the Silver Lake Neighborhood Council. I'm currently serving my third term, and when I was elected in 2019, I wanted to run because a big thing I wanted to do was help alleviate homelessness in my community, in our city, our county, etc. And you know, homelessness is an issue for everybody in this city. I would challenge you to find anybody who doesn't think it is. But for me, it's all about the approach. And we have to take a humane, compassionate approach. And part of that involves decriminalizing homelessness. Everybody asks, well, what's the elevator pitch of solving homelessness? And the elevator pitch is permanent supportive housing and services, not criminalizing homelessness as the City of Los Angeles has been doing through 4118. So for me, I'm doing this on a local level. I have served on our Advocates for People Experiencing Homelessness Committee. I was just reappointed to be our homelessness liaison for the Silver Lake Neighborhood Council.
Thank you.
And I've got a lot more to say later about that.
Thank you. And we will have a longer conversation about the issue of homelessness specifically later, which obviously is connected to housing affordability, but specifically on the issue of housing affordability more generally, Nick, what do you think needs to be done in Congress?
Yeah, and I think obviously the best way to keep folks off the street is to keep them housed. You know, California has the lowest per capita housing in the country. And so some of this is kind of basic economic principles of supply and demand. At LA Unified, I'm really proud that we've actually built 4 affordable housing projects, and we have 10 more coming before the board in coming months. We are a landowner. We have areas in kind of appropriate parts of the city for the type of development we're doing, including one in the 30th district in Hollywood. And so more municipalities, the federal government need to look at public land. I'm a Democrat who believes in efficiency and streamlining processes. And so the fact that in Los Angeles it costs upwards of $600,000 or $700,000 for a 250 square foot room is absurd and ultimately is not sustainable. I think Los Angelinos feel like they've taxed themselves a lot with Measure H and Triple H, and they're not seeing the return. And so we need to streamline the building process. I also agree with a lot of my colleagues when it comes to making sure Section 8 vouchers are market-based so that they can be applicable in places like LA, looking at national housing policy and also tax credits as well.
Thank you very much, Senator.
Thank you. We need to build more affordable housing. I was pleased to work with Burbank, Glendale, and Pasadena to create a regional housing trust specifically to build affordable housing in those 3 communities. We need to expand those regional housing trusts to do more. We need to also build accountability into our housing policy to make sure that developers are actually building affordable housing and reject this notion that if we build only luxury housing, it's going to trickle down to help average people. We know from 40 years of economics that trickle-down economics doesn't work. I was the only Democrat in 2011 to oppose the redevelopment takeaway because that was our dedicated revenue stream to pay for affordable housing. We would have had $15 billion spent on affordable housing had we not done away with redevelopment. And finally, there is a role for the federal government. FDR knew how to solve a problem. You define it, you fund it, you build it. The federal government should define it, fund it, and build it. And if we build more affordable units, we're going to help address the homelessness problem, but also for average people to have an affordable place to live.
Mr. President.
Thanks so much. You know, this issue for me is very much tied to what it means to have the American dream, as I'm glad many of my colleagues agree. I remember when my parents first bought their home, it was in Sunland, and we were so proud that we had that kind of economic security that a home brings. We lost that house a few years later to foreclosure, and we had to move. And so these issues are very much alive and well, not only in my own family, but for families across the country. For me, I very much agree that we need to bring back the first-time homeowners tax credit. That was something that my family took advantage of. We need to, I've called for the renter's tax credit that has to triple so that more renters can stay and keep their homes. And at the same time, I also know how Washington works. I've worked for a congressional appropriator who's directed federal resources to California, and I'm the only one on the stage that's called for 25% of all of my earmarks will go towards affordable housing projects. That's how we make change in Washington.
Thank you very much. Councilmember.
Thank you. I'm definitely in support of a renter's tax credit. It's essential that we keep renters in their homes. In the city of West Hollywood, 80% of my constituents are renters, and we have had an incredible rent stabilization ordinance. We need to do more to keep renters in their homes. Even now, renters are suffering, and so the federal government extending their COVID protections in the form of tenant protections is crucial. Secondly, we need to hold companies like Airbnb, VRBO, and other home sharing companies accountable. They are people are, especially landlords, putting their units up for rent, and even building owners and developers as well, and is taking stock out of the market where people can live. We also need to definitely have the federal government create an affordable housing fund that will go to cities. This is what we've done in the city of West Hollywood. It's been incredible, and replicating that the federal government is critical.
Thank you very much. Mr. Arreaga.
According to LA Magazine, the median rent in Los Angeles County is about $3,000. Think about what that means. That's $36,000 per year. What does that mean for a family making less than $50,000 per year? They're going to be unhoused. And so the first thing you can do is what I'm suggesting, lowering federal taxes for everyone making less than $100,000 per year with zero in federal taxes for anyone making less than $50,000, because you can barely make it in LA County with that amount of money. Secondly, I would support Chairwoman Maxine Waters' Housing Crisis Response Act and her bill to also provide down payment assistance programs for first-time home buyers that also addresses redlining and the history of racial discrimination in housing policies. So those are the three things that I would do as a member of Congress.
Thank you very much. The big issue that was being debated in the House this week had to do with the border. There was a bill to potentially have more border funding combined with Ukraine funding, combined with Israel funding, which was essentially killed in the Senate, and it's unclear what's going to happen on any of those three issues right now. But let's focus first on the border and immigration, and this next question goes to you, Mr. Dunwoody. Is there a crisis at the border right now? Why or why not, and what do you do about it?
Well, thank you for your question. You know, it was really interesting to see this week what happened when Speaker Johnson tried to bring the bill to the floor. Donald Trump and others essentially tanked it. Now, they'd been asking for this for some time, and they finally got it. Well, there's so much for unity on that front. In particular, I think what we need to do is make sure that we are creating an environment and space where people can come to this country as a refuge, who are fleeing overseas wars and other conflicts. I want to be able to support DACA, to expand the definition of asylum, legal definition of asylum, and to cut the red tape in the immigration process to have a fair and orderly system. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Alex.
Is there a crisis? Well, first off, did you answer the specific question? Is there a crisis at the border right now? Mr. Dunwoody.
There's work to be done.
Okay. Is there a crisis at the border right now?
Yes.
Yeah.
And
what do we do?
Yeah. And nationally, there is a reform to be had. We've seen the contours of what that looks like. There should be a pathway to citizenship for people who are here. There should be more resources at the border to strengthen border security. There need to be more asylum judges because it takes so long to process those applications. There needs to be, for legitimate asylum seekers, a real opportunity to come here and to flee real persecution. But at the same time, borders do have to mean something. So that grand bargain, pathway to citizenship. And on DACA, by the way, I'm the only person on this stage to have fought when Trump tried to undermine DACA. I was a leader in the effort to try to preserve it. Temporary protective status, the same thing. So there are these elements that you can see come together. Yet the Republicans couldn't say yes to the very deal that they sought in the first place, where Democrats, I think, actually gave up too much because there weren't these other elements that I just described built into what was proposed.
So I'll do a follow-up with this. So they've been talking about that deal for years. I mean, I remember when I was an intern, George W. Bush was pushing that.
Right.
And it never gets done. How do you actually get it done? There hasn't been an immigration deal in Congress in 40 years.
Yeah. I mean, one of the issues, if you listen to the negotiators, one of the issues that they describe is the extremes have prevented it from happening because loud voices intervene. But that bargain is necessary to protect the America that all of us want. We are all here because of immigration. There ought to be an opportunity for people who are in legitimate fear to be here. People who are here and aren't going anywhere should have that pathway to become real citizens here. And I think that at some point, it just takes guts, Alex, at the end of the day. This is a matter of political courage and doing the right thing for the right reasons.
Assembly member, is there a crisis at the border?
There absolutely is. You've got people who have been waiting to have their legally mandated day in court for asylum for over a year, waiting in detention centers. That's a crisis. There's a crisis in the number of people who are coming here because we no longer have the infrastructure in many of these other countries south of the border to process people where they're coming from so that we can begin that paperwork. And instead, people are fleeing desperate situations and arriving at the border, and we don't have the resources right now to really deal with those people. So we absolutely need to have more resources at the border. This is one of these times where I'm going to agree with the other Democrats up here. I agree with Mr. Feuer, where he identified a lot of the issues. The one thing that I'll take a little issue with is there are other people in California that have been working on this issue, including the state legislature, where we have also been weighing in on DACA and many other issues. And I would certainly agree that we need to have a path to citizenship for people who are living and working here, paying taxes, part of our economy, many times the parents of U.S. citizens, and who are still in the shadows. We need to get those people a path to citizenship.
Ms. Poldo.
So to directly answer the question, I believe that there is a humanitarian crisis at the border. I think there has been an overemphasis on this idea of criminals coming into the nation and an underemphasis on the idea that this is a humanitarian crisis in many ways influenced by USA's policies south of our border. For me, it's really disgusting that a few years ago, so many Democrats were upset that people were being detained. Families were being held in cages, kids in cages. But for some reason, it's okay now. No, it's actually not. And when I'm elected, I will absolutely fight to make sure that people are not being held in cages. People are actually being treated like human beings. It should be a lot easier to get into this nation, to become a legal citizen. And I will say that immigrants, both documented and undocumented, really make up the backbone of this nation. And anybody in this room, unless you are indigenous or Native American, you're an immigrant, and we should have sympathy. Also, abolish ICE.
Okay, there we go. There's a lot there. Mr. Melvoin, is there a crisis at the border? If there is, how do you actually get a deal done?
Yeah, there is a crisis at our border. There's also a crisis with our legal immigration system, as others have said, with the backlog that's really incentivizing people to come here illegally. There's also a crisis in the fact that we haven't taken care of our dreamers and our kids. And, not a week goes by, quite literally, where I don't hear from former students who are undocumented, who have done everything right, but really can't get their feet on the ground because we don't have a path to citizenship. When I was working in the Obama White House back in 2013, we had the Gang of Eight. We had a bipartisan immigration package that passed the Senate, very similar to what we were debating in the last few weeks, that has paths to citizenship for undocumented students. And folks, visa reform, especially H-1B visas, we're really shooting ourselves in the foot when it comes to high-skilled labor that's now going elsewhere. And of course, border security. And I think, Alex, to your question, I mean, this week is one of the things that makes us all so cynical about politics, when you actually have bipartisan compromise and it gets blown up because of politics. And so it's something that I would want to lead on when I got to Washington. We have to have the courage to call it for what it is. The Republicans had a deal that they blew up because of Donald Trump.
Thank you. Senator.
There's absolutely a crisis at the border, both in a real logistical sense, in a humanitarian sense. And the way to solve it is re-elect Joe Biden president, elect a Senate controlled by Democrats, and take back the House. And so we can control the levers of power to make sure that we do pass a law to create the path to citizenship, that we can have humane humanitarian policies that realize that there are economic drivers forcing people to seek asylum in our country. One of the reasons why I'm running is because if the bad people discourage the good people from getting involved, the bad people win by default. We need compassionate, caring individuals to represent us in Washington can take that human view of these issues. I'm proud that Senator Marielena Durazo, the strongest immigrant supporter in the legislature, endorses my campaign because she knows what's in my heart. I'm the grandson of Italian immigrants who came through Ellis Island, and one of the most proud moments I had was going back through Ellis Island to respect that legacy, and we need to make sure that we elect people who care about other people.
I'm going to ask a follow-up. So, obviously, most of you want to see Joe Biden elected and have a Democratic Senate and a Democratic House. It's hard to sort of see how there's a Democratic Senate based off of the map. Maybe it happens. More likely to be a Democratic House, and the presidency right now looks like a toss-up. If there is divided government in some way, and certainly not probably 60 Democratic seats in the Senate, what is a bipartisan deal that can actually pass?
So realistically, we may not take back, or we may not control the Senate, but the White House is critical. Because frankly, let's be honest, the Trump agenda has been a divisive, racist, nasty agenda from a nasty human being. And we need to make sure he never gets near the White House again. I think if Joe Biden, or when Joe Biden gets reelected, that sends a message to those folks who are mongering in hate and racism. That's a start. And then the good people have to reach across the aisle to make sure that we have compromise. As you mentioned, George Bush was primed to do immigration reform before 9/11. One of the consequences of 9/11 was we lost that opportunity where Bush was determined to do comprehensive immigration reform. It needs to be done bipartisan, and I think it will once Trump is out of the picture.
Okay, Mr. Bedrosian.
Petrosian? Ratevosian.
What? Sorry, I'm sorry.
Ratevo, no problem. It's okay, Alex. So I think the only crisis that we see at the border now is because of Congress's dysfunction. This is a very simple issue. You have what took place in the last couple of weeks, a bipartisan agreement, and a bunch of career politicians got in the way of this bill moving forward. So the last thing, if anyone wants immigration reform to be a reality, if you want more resources to go to the border to help processing asylum seekers, all of the issues that we mostly all of us agree on, including some border security as well, sure. We don't need to send another career politician to Washington. The only thing that is going to make a difference is if we can elect younger people who have more direct relationship with the kinds of issues that we're trying to solve. And I think that is the kind of difference that will make these kinds of issues, including immigration reform, student loan reform, so many different issues, actually get to the finish line.
Member, is there a crisis at the border? Okay.
Thank you. There is a crisis, and the real crisis, and I will say this, I was undocumented till I was 16 and got my residency at 16 and became a citizen after law school. The crisis is that we, as an incredible nation, have not been able to come together, both sides, and provide solutions. The solution is to increase visas, H-1B visas, to match H-1A visas. It is to put more funding at the border to protect the border for more safety, to vet people properly, to let the people that are coming here for asylum and for freedom be in the system so we could count everybody. The truth is, when people aren't in the system, but they're still coming in, we have no idea who they are and how they're treated. A lot of folks and businesses then end up using those immigrants for another form of slave labor. And it's an ugly truth we have to face on both sides, Democrats and Republicans, and come up with a solution.
Thank you very much. Is there a crisis at the border?
There is a humanitarian crisis at the border, and there are families there who are fleeing violence by cartels that receive arms from the U.S. that are exported from the U.S. They are fleeing poverty, they are fleeing climate change, they are fleeing all sorts of negative factors. And by the way, for the past 100 years, our country engaged in foreign intervention throughout Latin America and the Caribbean, and those things had destabilizing effects in that region. So we have a moral obligation to now help those families, and we also have to abide by our asylum laws, which we have said that we will abide by under international law. Now, I will tell you, I was in the Homeland Security Committee as a legislative advisor when H.R. 2 was being proposed by Republicans. They did not accept a single Democratic amendment. They are not interested in our ideas. They're interested in ramming through their xenophobic agenda, and we need fighters in Congress who are actually going to represent progressive values and abide by immigrant rights in our country. That's why I'm running.
A quick follow-up to you. Are you concerned? We've had record amounts of crossing, and it seems like a lot of folks there are overwhelmed with what's happening. Are you concerned about that? Is there a limit in terms of how many people we should be allowing in?
We need to be expanding legal pathways to our country. There's parole authority that the president has used and can continue to use. He has also authority under temporary protected status to protect people here in our country. He has parole in place to protect dreamers, undocumented families here in our country. There's a lot that the executive can do. We just need the political will to do it, and we need people in Congress who will push the administration on these issues as well.
Mr. Balekian, is there a crisis at the border?
Yes, absolutely, there is a crisis at the border. We had 750,000 illegal immigrants that were just granted free medical care here in California, and we have a $68 billion budget deficit. So everybody's promising free things. All of our taxes are going to have to go up to pay for it. Again, we should treat this country like we treat our own home. We keep the door closed. We look at the peephole when somebody knocks on the door. We open it, we say, who are you? We vet them before they come in. So what we need to do is seal the border, build that wall, fund ICE to get out anybody that we don't want, and then get a points-based, transparent system, much like Canada has, that prioritizes younger, able-bodied people, those with job skills that the country needs, those with an existing family connection in the country, and also those who can speak the language. I believe that we should recruit skilled, industrious immigrants who will embrace our Constitution and who will integrate into American culture, much like my extended family has.
Thank you very much.
I have to say something on the healthcare point. Actually, undocumented immigrants pay taxes, federal taxes, here in the country, and they have a surplus for Social Security and Medicare, so they've paid into this. This isn't a handout.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay. The next question, I think we can do this in 30 seconds each, but part of the most important thing that you do in Congress is you serve on committees. That's where you spend a lot of your time. And obviously, you don't always get the first pick of your committee. Ultimately, that will be probably the Democratic leader or Republican leader, depending on who wins. But if you could pick, which committee in Congress would you most serve on and why? Mr. Feuer, let's start with you.
Thanks, Alex. A couple. Financial services, because it has jurisdiction over two things that matter a lot. First, housing and homelessness, and second, over banking and other issues. My leadership on the Wells Fargo matter fits in nicely with my ability to do that. The other committee is energy and commerce. One of the key reasons to run for office right now is the urgency of the climate crisis and leadership that's going to be specific and focused on that issue. So those are two committees I would like to look at.
Assembly member, the one committee you'd most want to serve on?
One committee, you
Yes.
said. So you're narrowing it down, which is good. So I do a lot of work in the legislature on infrastructure, and as an environmentalist and as an environmental leader, I do believe that we should be addressing a lot of our environmental issues through infrastructure. So energy and commerce for sure, because we need to harden our grid, we need to move away from a fossil fuel economy, we need to get renewables online much more quickly, which by the way will be much cheaper to operate once they're installed. This is an imperative and something that I've been working on in California.
Thank you. Ms. Boldo, the one committee.
Thank you. I actually have to agree with Mike Feuer. I would say financial services. For me, I currently serve as the treasurer for the Neighborhood Council in Silver Lake, and a big part of my platform for running for Congress is economic equity. And economic equity includes universal health care, housing, and tuition-free college for everybody. If we have money to send bombs all over the world, we have money for health care, housing, and education for every single person in this nation.
Mr. Melvoin, the one committee you'd want to serve on?
I would choose education and the workforce. I think we often underestimate the role of the federal government in education, from universal pre-K expansion, which I would push for the full funding of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. The school district has a $1 billion encroachment into our general fund because the federal government has an unfunded mandate with supporting students with disabilities and our poor students, but also the career technical education piece. We've really underinvested in this country in vocational education, and when we look at high-skilled jobs in new sectors, but also the just transition to a green economy, we need to prepare our workforce for the future.
Senator, the one committee.
Thank you. I've chaired the Senate Appropriations Committee for the past 5 years. Congressman Schiff will be a loss to California on appropriations. If you want to get things done, you get on the Appropriations Committee, and you don't get elected to do nothing. And so I would love to take his spot, both representing the 30th District, but also on appropriations as well.
Control the money, baby. All right. Yes.
So, I've worked in Congress, so I know that you can't get the Appropriations Committee for your first assignment, sir. No offense. For me, I would serve on the House Foreign Affairs Committee. We live in a dangerous world, and we clearly need more members of Congress who put a pro-humanity foreign policy agenda. I'm honored to be endorsed by Foreign Policy for America. They endorsed me because I was the first candidate in this race to call for a ceasefire. And I was the first candidate in this race to call for a pro-humanity foreign policy agenda. So Congress needs more level-minded leaders, and that's the committee that I serve on.
Thank you. If I could, I would also want to serve on appropriations because we were able to get $300,000 from Adam Schiff in appropriations to fund our 24/7 behavioral health mobile crisis response units. However, since that won't be a possibility, I'd love to serve on the Judiciary Committee as an attorney. I know how incredibly important the courts are and who we place and who we can stop from being on the courts because of the rise in authoritarianism, hate towards all of us, all the rollback of rights that are happening in the courts. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I would also choose the House Judiciary Committee. I was a law clerk on the Senate Judiciary Committee when I was a student at Berkeley Law, so I know how those committees work. I want to be there because I want to be a voice for the Women's Health Protection Act to protect reproductive rights on that committee. I want to protect voting rights through the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. I want to protect LGBTQ rights through that committee on the Equality Act. I want to protect immigrant rights on that committee through immigration reform. All of those key core civil rights issues go through the Judiciary Committee. Congressman Schiff is currently on the Judiciary Committee, and I will be there to be a strong voice for those civil rights.
Thank you.
I would want to be on the Judiciary Committee because the one big issue that is near and dear to my heart is term limits. And a term limit amendment originates in the Judiciary Committee. It has originated every single Congress, and it dies there because people don't want to cut their own gravy train. I think this country is in a shambles because of career politicians who are running roughshod and have more allegiance to the lobbyists that they hang out with rather than their own constituents. So I would be there to shepherd it through, make sure it doesn't die in committee, and gets to the floor for a vote.
Thank you very much. Mr. Dunwoody.
Thank you very much. Maybe we'll just first clarify, Mr. Feuer, just that I'm part of a group of folks who did come to the country, but not by choice. Not everyone came to this country by choice, and I think that that's meaningful when we're talking about immigration, so as not to demonize people. If there's one committee that I want to sit on, it's the Veterans Committee, to make sure that we are making things better for veterans. When we think about post-World War II and all the programs that came out of the post-war and everything that we have, when we made it better for veterans, we set the template for making it better for everyone else, and I think that we can do that in this district and in the country.
Thank you very much. Next question goes to the Assembly member. And homelessness is the biggest issue for 90+% of people. Traditionally, more of a local issue than a federal issue, but there is a federal role in this. We've spent more money on homelessness, and the problem has continued to get worse. Why is that? And what is the federal government's role in fixing this problem, and is it just more money?
Well, for one thing, you're never going to deal with homelessness in a minute. So I'll just give you some overall thoughts. First of all, let's remember that the fastest growing population on the streets of Los Angeles is senior women. So we can't fix homelessness without fixing the price of housing. We do not have enough subsidized, affordable housing for everybody who qualifies based on their income. For every 10 people who come to my office needing affordable housing, there are maybe between 3 and 4 units available on a good day. The rest of those people, there's nowhere for them to go. There may be a temporary shelter, maybe, although there are a lot of bureaucratic reasons why sometimes people can't even get a shelter bed when it's available. So we have to, first of all, build enough shelter beds for everybody and enough affordable housing if we're really going to be serious about homelessness. We absolutely need to have the support services that people need who are addicted to substances, who are mentally ill. I authored really controversial legislation to compel very severely mentally ill people who are going to die, who are on the streets, into getting treatment. Controversial, but we have to be willing to entertain things because we can't just allow this situation to continue and get worse.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Alex, would you mind repeating the question verbatim?
Okay.
Word for word.
Approximately.
We've spent a lot of money on homelessness, and the problem has continued to get worse on the streets. What is the federal government's role in fixing that? And is it more spending, or is it something else?
Absolutely. So thank you for the question. I will say that one of my issues is that homelessness has become, like many other issues in the United States, an industrial complex. We have poured so much money into solving homelessness, but we actually haven't made any gains materially. If you look at CA30 specifically, this district has increased in homelessness year after year for at least the past half decade. What we need to be doing is investing in permanent supportive housing and services. I know that a lot of people want to keep their jobs, but unfortunately, we have to give people housing. And for me, housing is a human right. I am a renter. Renters' issues and homelessness issues are very much intertwined. And we need to extend COVID protections because right now, so many Angelenos are currently facing eviction because they were unable to pay rent for a few months during the pandemic. So we have to ensure that housed people stay housed and put people who are unhoused into housing.
Thank you very much. Mr. Melvoin.
Yeah, I mean, this is an issue important to me. I, on the side, run a nonprofit camp for homeless kids and have been dealing with youth homelessness for my career. LA Unified has 19,000 kids living in homeless, unhoused conditions, which is more than almost every school district in America's total population. I do think that housing is important and part of it, of course. I think the federal government can also use the tax system to keep folks in their homes and especially keep kids out of poverty. One of the wins that we actually had in the federal politics in the last month, which are rarer and rarer to come by, was the child tax credit and the expansion, which is going to keep 500,000 kids out of poverty. And I think through things like the earned income tax credit, the renter's tax credit that we learned about, we actually keep families off the street. I also think one of the challenges with the polarization in places like LA was you were either like pro-homelessness or anti-homelessness. And if you said that maybe an encampment shouldn't be near a school, you were somehow an authoritarian. But if you said that they should, you were somehow a communist. And I think our rhetoric around this has to change, and we have to address it with the crisis it is. It's not fair to anyone, including the folks living in those tents, to be in front of a school. It's also not fair to the school children, and I think we just need to be honest about that.
Thank you. Senator.
Thank you. There's two sides to the homeless issue. There's the behavioral health, drug addiction side, and then there's the structural economic side. And we need to address both. And frankly, you're right. There's been a lot of money spent, not a lot of accountability, and not a lot of results. And the public is frustrated by that because they're seeing the problem right in front of them not get better. I'm an optimist. In spite of the LA Times story today on Care Court, I think Care Court is going to make a difference long term because it's going to build the transitional housing. It's going to help families get people from the behavioral health side into the system. We don't spend enough time on the economic disparities that drive middle-aged families, mostly families of color, into homelessness. We need to do more short-term rental assistance program, which the federal government can do. Certainly the tax policy and the renter's tax credit need to be expanded and implemented. So there's a lot the federal government can do, and there's a lot we can do on the local level to address this problem, and I think both federal, state, and county folks need to work collaboratively to address it.
Thank you very much. And for people that may not know, Care Court is a new system that was put into place fairly recently, which will potentially compel people who are severely mentally ill or drug addicted into care.
And that's the biggest shift in policy, is we're now going to be able to compel people into the system, which frankly some civil libertarians don't like, but to me it's not progressive just leaving somebody on the street.
Thanks so much. So I think, one of the big challenges with the housing policy now is that we don't address the root cause of homelessness. I agree with all the things that my colleagues have said about increasing behavioral support, lowering the cost of rent, providing tax credits so more renters can keep their homes. But one of the most effective things that any one of us can do if we're elected to Congress is we could use our earmark requests. And members of Congress get a certain number of earmark requests. And we can use these earmark requests to direct certain funding directly to our district. That's what I've said I'll do. 25% of my earmark requests, I've said, will go towards affordable housing projects that integrate social services with housing, temporary housing support. That's how we can be effective in Congress. There's no shortage of congressional bills that we would all support. But if we want to be effective on this issue and help local leaders, that's one way that we can get resources, even during a dysfunctional Congress.
I'm proud to say that we have been effective on the issue of homelessness in the city of West Hollywood. Homelessness has dropped 60% since I've been in office, and we've done that by protecting our renters, and the federal government can provide funding to protect renters and help them keep them in their home, renters tax credits. We have provided social services, permanent supportive housing, 24/7 behavioral health crisis response units that are helping the unhoused and residents, by the way, as well. We need to make sure that this district, by the way, is the largest LGBTQ congressional district in America, and most unhoused people are Black, Indigenous, and other people of color, and LGBTQ in this district. And so specific care and compassion is really important to understand. We've done it in the city of West Hollywood, and every city getting funding to do what we have is going to really help our unhoused issue. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is a very serious issue for our district. There are 71,000 homeless persons in LA County, and our state alone accounts for 49% of unsheltered people in the entire country. So we need to have good federal partners on this issue. So in Congress, I'm going to support Chairwoman Maxine Waters' Ending Homelessness Act, which would, yes, inject billions of dollars into affordable housing. We need to have audits. We need to make sure the money's going where it needs to go. So take your point, Elex, on that. But we also need to recognize that this disproportionately affects veterans, people of color, LGBTQ plus youth. So there's a bill also that I would support called the Healthy Foundation for Homeless Veterans Act, which would provide for full funding to get all our homeless veterans off the street. It's just unjust and unfair to see any veteran on the street. And then there's the Department of Housing has an LGBTQ plus youth initiative that they have pilot programs in different parts of the country. I don't believe they have one here in our district. I'm going to push the housing department to expand that here so that LGBTQ plus youth don't have homelessness.
Thank you very much.
You all have been walking down the streets. The majority of the homeless that you see are severely mentally ill or they are drug addicted and prioritize their addiction over holding down a steady job. As a physician in Congress, I will solve this crisis by treating it as the mental health and drug addiction issue that it is. Number one, open up the federal institutions so the severely mentally ill can be hospitalized, can be given their medications because they lack capacity, can get better, and then can be released to follow up in an outpatient clinic. Number two, the number one predictor of sobriety among drug addicts is family support. 40% of California homeless have family out of state. So in Congress, we can justify moving them across state lines to reunite them with their family who are going to maintain their sobriety, and we can couple that with federal dollars that their home states will take them with. Finally, these drug addicts cannot be expected to remain sober if fentanyl is flooding our streets from a porous border. So in Congress, I will shut the border and stem the flow of fentanyl so that we can make these people sober.
All right, Mr. Dunwoody.
Does Alex think that all homeless people are drug users? I'm just curious.
I said the majority of them, because if it was truly an affordable housing issue, then with $20 billion of our tax money already spent, this problem would have been solved. The mental health issue is being ignored.
All right, Mr. Dunwoody.
I think we need to first stop, not demonize people for struggling. If anyone ends up on the street, they're going to be dealing with mental health challenges. They're going to be, have access to various kinds of things to help cope. We have to deal with the heart and the trouble, and the root is that the housing is unaffordable. It is contributing to the crisis, and all kinds of problems can lead from there. At the same time, we need to make sure that we're providing more funding to mental health services and drug treatment programs so that people can get the help and support they need off the street. We need compassion. We don't need confusion, and we don't need to demonize people for being in a situation that they're in.
Mr. Feuer.
Thank you, Alex. So when Mayor Bass initially supported me in this race, and since we've worked together since that time, she's emphasized the partnership that she wants us to have on this issue, because I'm not going to be just a legislator, but a champion on this issue. So my first day in Congress, I'm introducing legislation. It'll have these components in it. First, there are veterans on the street who have to choose between taking disability benefits and qualifying for housing, because those benefits count as income. The Secretary for Veterans Affairs told Mayor Bass that he can't change that unilaterally. Congress can change it. I will. Next, the city and the county need more mental health beds. There's a federal rule that prohibits the feds from reimbursing the locals with facilities for more than 16 beds in them. It's very cost ineffective. We've been seeking a waiver from that rule. There shouldn't be the rule. In my first bill, will be that eliminating that rule. Next, we need more, not just housing vouchers, but project-based housing vouchers. For our audience, that means vouchers that will incentivize the creation of affordable housing. And on substance abuse as well. The Fed should be reimbursing us for substance abuse treatment of more than 90 days. They don't right now.
Okay.
All the first day.
All right. That's a lot on the first day. We're gonna now go to you, Ms. Poldo. This is a question that I think we can also do in 30 seconds. And as we all try to get to know these candidates and understand them as people, because so many of them do agree on so many issues, I think it's interesting to get to know you as a person. So this question is, who is the one person who most shaped your worldview, and how did that change your worldview?
Oh, that's a good question. It's always hard when you have to pick one.
Yeah.
But I would have to say my mom. You know, I think there is a big misunderstanding when it comes to people who are LGBTQIA, specifically transgender people. And a lot of people say, well, they must not have been accepted or loved by their parents. But you know what? The reason that I am an out LGBTQIA person, specifically a transgender person, is because I had the support of my family, and specifically my mom, who has always been there to support me through thick and thin.
Thank you.
My mom.
Mr. Melvoin.
I have the same, well, it's different, not Maebe's mom, but my mom. And, you know, I wish my mom were here. She wanted to come, and I told her I'd rather you be out knocking on doors, which is what she's doing. But
Yeah.
both my parents, I'm really fortunate to grow up in the household that I did. But my mom, it was just through osmosis that I really learned about what it means to be a good person. You know, she is the neighborhood earthquake preparedness captain, making sure everyone on their block has walkie-talkies and water. She always took me to vote. You know, there wasn't an explicit, like, you should be in public office. No one in my family has, but it just was kind of, again, through osmosis, how to treat other people, how to volunteer, how to give back your time. And so I credit my mom.
Senator, who most shaped your worldview?
I'm going to give the same answer. I'm
Okay.
the son of a single mom, and I know what it's like to take her last dollar, and I know what it's like to go back the next day and not have a dollar, and I know what it's like to live in a one-bedroom house or one-bedroom apartment, and she gave me the bedroom, and she slept on the couch. And she talked to me about the Armenian orphans back when I was a kid in the 1970s, and this was an Italian traditional housewife who dreamed to be a nurse in a leper colony.
Wow.
That was my mom, and she was such a good soul. And when my brother came out to her as a 16-year-old in the 70s, she didn't even know what gay meant, but she knew she loved her son. And she was on stage with him in 2000 at the Millennial March, standing side by side with my brother. So I have just tremendous admiration for my mom.
Beautiful story.
I might get in trouble with my mom because I'm going to pick someone else.
Okay.
I love you, Mom. But for me, it's my grandfather. My grandfather's name is Jirair Ratevosian as well. He was the kindest, most decent man you'll ever meet. He had a small business in Van Nuys for 30 years. And because we were a middle-class family, my parents were working 2 jobs. My mom was at McDonald's. My dad was working nights at a liquor store. My grandparents picked me up from school, and I learned from my grandfather how to balance a checkbook, how to treat everyone with decency and respect, and how to be humble. And I think Congress needs a little bit more humility. We all need a little bit more humility.
Ain't that the truth? Yes.
Thank you. I'm going to definitely say my mom, too. She was my best friend growing up. You know, a woman who, my dad, we fled the country. My dad didn't tell my mom that we were going to stay here permanently. So her choice was taken away. She was a feminist, which helped me become a feminist, helped me become a person who fights for people to have choice, because I saw what it was when my mother didn't have that choice. She had a really hard time when I came out, but stood by me stronger than anyone else. And this is why I stand up for people. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
I also have to say my mother, she's actually here in the audience today, and
Hi, Mom.
I am here because of my mother. She was born in a rural village in Guatemala where little girls didn't have access to education, and she came here to the country in search of opportunities. And growing up here in the district, my mother always told me 2 things. First, education is the key to success. And second, it's better to give than to receive. Public service should always be at the forefront. And it took me a while to understand the second part, and I'm here because of those values that she instilled in me.
Thank you very much.
If I had to choose somebody, it would actually be the family members of the patients that I take care of. So I'm an intensive care physician, and routinely I get yelled at by family members. And initially, when I was younger, I took it personally. And then something clicked. I said, they're not angry with me, they're just unhappy with something in their lives. And so when I see people right now angry, yelling at each other, I say, they're not yelling at each other, there's something unhappy in their lives, and we just need to figure out what that is and fix it.
Thank you.
I think of my influences in 2 phases. You know, of course, my parents and grandparents. My family immigrated, I should say, moved from the Deep South. Since after slavery, my family moved back from the Deep South in order to be able to find jobs in the North, working in the auto industry in West, here in Monrovia. And, you know, I stand on their shoulders. My mother was an entrepreneur. She started a flower shop, and that was my first job and influence there. And that led me to be able to have opportunities to work for great progressive leaders like Barack Obama and Bernie Sanders. So,
Thank you very much.
Whose worldviews I adopted as well. Thank you.
Mr. Feuer.
Thanks. My dad, who barely survived a Nazi prisoner of war camp in World War II, and when he did, said to me when I was growing up, I determined to do the most important work in the world when I lived through that experience. And that became my focus, was to find a way in my life to matter the way my dad, who became a teacher and a school principal, did. And that's why I've chosen to devote myself to public service. This is my dad.
Finally, a shout out. Dad.
So I grew up in South Florida during the Anita Bryant years, remember her? And my mother founded the first chapter of NOW in Broward County when I was a girl, and she absolutely forced me to canvass my whole childhood for the ERA and abortion rights. And she always assumed that I would be a lawyer. She always said, you're gonna go to law school, one day you'll be a Supreme Court justice. I didn't go to law school. I studied film and I became a filmmaker and sort of broke her heart. But I think that early imprinting is the reason that I'm here. The day after I got elected to the state legislature, she called me and said, now you can go to law school. But I know that right now I'm doing her proud, and she's the reason that I'm able to do what I do.
Thank you very much. And a shout out to my mom if she's watching as well.
She makes great cookies.
She makes great cookies and brownies for those who have been on the show before. So a big shout out as well to the Wilshire Ebell Theater, who is funding all of this. Thank you. Shout out to them. We wouldn't be here without them, without the organizers, without the volunteers. So we're going to ask their question, which they get because they paid for everything. So they are interested in candidates, what they will do. Nick, Melvoin, this will go to you, to help Los Angeles' trove of historic buildings faced with a mandate to retrofit or be demolished. There's some 1,500 buildings in the situation. Many are LA City cultural historic monuments or on the National Register of Historic Places, like the Ebell is. These spaces make LA special and are an important connection to the past. So what will you do as a member of Congress to protect places like the Ebell?
Yeah, and again, and thank you for hosting us here. And in the 30th District, there are so many historic monuments and landmarks, and it's, I think we're all biased, but I think the best of the 435 congressional districts for that reason, among others. I think it's important to do both, the preservation and the retrofitting. I was sitting in my office yesterday when we had an earthquake. And it's important to help these historic institutions with that retrofitting through both financial incentives and also an on-ramp. This can't be something that's mandated right away, but also finding ways to make it more efficient. One of the things, I chair the school district's facilities and procurement committee, and one of the things that we're working on is trying to make it more efficient to do things like retrofit our school buildings. And actually, we just did a check this morning, and all 1,000 schools are fine from the earthquake and ready for school on Monday. And so it would be about federal funding and also trying to streamline some of those processes, but not have an unfair mandate that puts places like the Ebell in kind of that, well, do we shut down or do we have to spend a lot of money overnight? And I would be supportive of the properties, not just in the 30th, but throughout the state.
Senator.
That's a great question, and one of the reasons why a lot of the Pasadena Heritage and Glendale Historical Association folks are supporting my campaign is because they know how much I care about the rich history and the architectural history of California, in particular Los Angeles. I was pleased to have just set up an actual tax increment plan to allow historic venues to recapture some of their tax increment to be reinvested. The Rose Bowl, the Hollywood Bowl, the Coliseum are beneficiaries of that. We started with big venues, but I think that can be expanded to the smaller historical venues as well, because once you tear down these buildings, you don't get them back. And I've been criticized in Sacramento in a number of the housing bills to make sure that we insert historic preservation into those bills. And some people don't like that. And we don't want all of California to look the same, and we want to appreciate our history, and we certainly don't want to lose venues like this. And I actually have a record of preserving and working with the historic communities to do that. And so it's something that Washington can do. And there's an actual effort to create a historic venue caucus nationally that the Rose Bowl folks are working with other venues around the country to preserve. And they've asked me if I'm blessed to win to be part of that caucus.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks so much for that question, and thanks to the Ebell for hosting us today. I completely agree that there's so much that we need to do, not only to protect and these magnificent sites, but also to be a champion for them in Congress. I think you all have hosted the Congressional Arts Caucus and the arts competition that Congressman Schiff hosts as well, and I think showcasing the kind of art and culture that comes from different sites across the district is something that members of Congress can do back in Washington and showcase what makes the district so great and so diverse. In addition to all the things that Senator Portantino said about the caucus and supporting federally, I think here's another way where we can actually use our earmarks to direct resources to help different locations. I think we have to be realistic that it's going to be another several years of a dysfunctional Congress until we can get rid of all the career politicians. The only way to actually get things done is to use the power of the purse and use earmark requests to direct and support places like Ebell and others.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We have a historic preservation commission in the city of West Hollywood and a historic preservation alliance, and a member here in the audience from our historic preservation alliance. We having a historic preservation caucus is incredible. The historic buildings give us a rich history of where we came from, what makes this incredible district unique, and I think we put funding to help renovate, bring specific funding to cities that want to renovate and update their historic buildings, but also bring some youth into the mix, because the young generation learning about the history and bringing in a little digital flair will help. Put it on social media. Let the entire district know exactly what is the history, why it's so cool. Bring social media experts and influencers to make these places even more popular for everyone.
Thank you very much.
We definitely need to do everything possible to preserve our historical sites, our cultural sites. This is just such a beautiful building to be in. And so absolutely, I would sit down with all the people who are in charge of these places, see how we could use the appropriations process in Congress to bring more federal dollars to help them, work with the local city council members, work with state legislators, work with the governor, see what we could be doing collaboratively to make sure that we're preserving all of these sites.
I just wanted to say that I think Senator Portantino's bill allowing the Rose Bowl, Coliseum, and larger venues to take back their money is a bit laughable, because you could have prioritized places like this. I've been to a Taylor Swift concert at the Rose Bowl. They made a lot of money. They don't need to reinvest their tax dollars. So I think having prioritized buildings that mean something to the community. If you're from the Glendale Burbank area, Pickwick, that's gone. Right? It's being torn down. So things that actually matter to the community doesn't have a voice in the chambers where things are discussed. Another thing is, this foundation relies on the largesse of private citizens. So if you actually were able to cut the taxes somehow of private citizens so that they have more disposable income to spend it on things that give them joy, that would be a good way of reapportioning the money.
I didn't think this was going to be the question where we do the rebuttal, but the historical society question is the one. So, Senator Portantino, your response to what he's alleging about your bills.
Well, first of all, when you are an effective legislator, you set up programs and then you expand on them. So obviously we started with big historical venues because we wanted to create the program, and then we can expand it. I've already talked to a number of the smaller venues around the state to try to expand it. It's the same thing I did with the theater, the live theater bills. First year we created the program, the second year we funded it, and now live theaters throughout the state of California are getting the opportunity to get their payroll subsidized. So incremental positive change makes a difference, and I respectfully disagree with my colleague.
Okay. Mr. Dunwoody.
Well, thank you for the question, and it's just great to be here. And having events here, I think it's a great way to continue to build up awareness of great places like this, so that they become more popular and people can take advantage of all the great events and things that you have here. I've worked in conservation for over 10 years, advocating for the protection of public places and naming public lands as national monuments. So I don't think it's particularly far-fetched to be able to include places like this in historic preservation. preservation and for all those other purposes. And also, there's opportunities to be able to update and retrofit and provide new efficiencies for buildings like this. One of the good things we have is the Inflation Reduction Act, which provides tax credits for retrofitting, for heat pumps, for all these other kinds of things, including solar panels, to be able to really work to update a lot of our buildings. And I hope to be a champion for that in Congress.
Mr. Feuer.
Thanks, Alex. So there are really two parts to the question. One, obviously all of us feel strongly about the importance of cultural and historic preservation. But the other part of the question was about rehabilitation buildings for earthquake purposes, and we just, of course, had a relatively small earthquake yesterday. I think it's really imperative for us to be thinking broadly about the earthquake retrofit issue. You know, I worked closely with Mayor Garcetti when the city put in place the soft story retrofit program, which I hope will save many lives. Hospitals are under a mandate to retrofit, and that keeps getting extended, not enough resources for that. One of the things about being a legislator from this district is to focus on the most fundamental public health and safety needs of the community. And when it comes to earthquake retrofits, buildings like this are really important. So are hospitals. So are other buildings in our community. I don't want to convene experts to determine what the most top priorities should be for the allocation of those scarce resources, because at the end of the day, the earthquake retrofit piece is about saving lives, and we know that earthquake is coming.
Thank you.
I actually came into politics through historic preservation activism. I was a very active board member for the LA Conservancy's Modern Committee for a number of years. I served as their commercial chair, and I was very intimately involved with saving a lot of landmark buildings around Los Angeles, like the Cinerama Dome, the case study houses, and the Capitol Records building, and many others. So this is an area I know very, very well. And by the way, my very first bill in the legislature was a bill around adaptive reuse. It was a bipartisanly supported bill to allow it easier to adaptively reuse historic buildings. I also was one of the people who got Glendale's very first historic districts allowed by code. So this is something very near and dear to my heart. This is what gives LA its sense of place. One of the reasons these buildings face the wrecking ball is because it's really hard to reuse them because of codes, because of parking requirements, lots of other things. We can even nationally say that if it's not health and safety related, to relax a lot of those, to allow buildings to be reused so that they don't face the wrecking ball.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Historic preservation, also very important to me. So I was originally born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I grew up in Chicago, and I moved to Los Angeles a little over 10 years ago. When I lived in Chicago, I was an architectural and historical tour guide. And so this was something that was my job, and I got to learn so much about historic preservation and the importance of architecture as an art form. And to me, architecture, it's so important, especially historic architecture, because it really provides an insight into our history, our American history, our global history. I'm a big fan of Frank Lloyd Wright. I'm a big fan of Richard Neutra, which we have a big number of their buildings here right in California's 30th Congressional District. I've seen over 160 of Frank Lloyd Wright's buildings all across the U.S., and I would not have been able to do that without historic preservation efforts. So for me, I'm all about giving more money to historic preservation, both on a national scale, a state scale, and a local scale. Also, retrofitting is so important here, as I learned after moving to California.
Thank you very much. All right, so as we're starting to get close to running out of time, maybe we do this next question in 30 seconds as well. In terms of the questions that people from the audience are asking, a lot of them are about the fact that Congress doesn't really work, that there's a lot of dysfunction. So my question, Senator Portantino, in 30 seconds is, what's one bill that you could actually pass in a bipartisan function, and how do you do it?
So one of the things that I'm very passionate about are special needs kids. And California gets shortchanged on the allocation for special needs kids. We get about 30 cents on the dollar. And so one of the things that I actually want to do on day one is I want to change that funding formula. And I think we can get bipartisan support around the most vulnerable children in our schools. And, I have a soft spot for that, for those kids. And I'm, determined to solve that problem. And I think I can succeed.
Congresswoman Bass did a lot on that issue. Yes.
This is a good question. I think I'm of two minds. One, I think as a member of the LGBTQ community, we have so many challenges. And with Trump facing re-election, there's so much on the line for people who look like me and for all members of the LGBTQ community. So I think the Equality Act will go a long way in expanding protections for the LGBTQ community. But I also think we need to audit the Pentagon. And if we could pass one bill, I'd audit the Pentagon because we'd save a lot more money. We could direct a lot of those resources into domestic programs.
Thank you. Something that could pass in a bipartisan way. How do you do it?
Thank you. 24/7 behavioral health mobile crisis response units. We were able to get $300,000 from Adam Schiff, went through appropriations, so there was support behind it. This is for our unhoused folks and residents, takes pressure off our first responders, off law enforcement, off hospitals. We'll get the Republicans on our side because of public safety, and we'll get folks that, the truth is, we want universal health care, we're not there yet, so what can we do? And this is what we can do to bring residents behavioral health services for free and help their community.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Something that can pass. How do we do it?
So Republicans often say that they want to lower federal taxes, right? And so I am proposing lowering federal taxes for anyone earning less than $50,000 in income. Right now, the tax bracket is such that your first $11,000 is taxed at 10%, and then from $11,000 to $50,000, it's taxed at 12%. And so I'm proposing put that to zero. Your first $50,000 should not have federal income tax because you can barely pay your rent with your first $50,000. And so there's Republicans on the Hill who say they want to do that. I'll take them up on that offer.
Great.
I would pass comprehensive immigration reform with the points-based system that I mentioned. This would allow people who are in the country illegally to submit an application so they could get a placement on the list, no faults. The people who are DACA are here, they speak the language, they're younger, they have job skills, so they would rank high on the list. Those people who are claiming asylum, their applications would be processed quickly. They wouldn't get more points for asylum, but they would be processed and put on the list somewhere. And because you address those and you make it a transparent system, I think everybody would agree to it.
Thank you very much.
Well, not everyone, but one of the bills I will first work on is the climate emergency. I think that right now we're seeing it play out firsthand, and we've got to really do some things to build up our resilience, so to make sure that we're prepared for these climate changes that are going to happen. And I think we can get everyone on board for that because we all breathe air, last I checked, we all drink water, and we need to protect those things for everyone.
Something you can pass.
Yeah. So, Elex, when I mentioned the homeless legislation introduced on my first day, it was with the very thought in mind that this could pass on a bipartisan basis. All members of Congress care about veterans and making sure they're not left on the street. All members of Congress are confronting mental health issues in their own districts and substance abuse issues. They can relate to the needs to change these basic rules. Everyone in Congress should view homelessness as a nonpartisan issue that affects every community, and being able to lead with this is a way to actually accomplish something that matters here too.
Great. Assembly member.
So Democrats and Republicans and everybody in between all want their kids to be able to go to college and to graduate without crippling student debt. I don't know why in this country we're still doing student loans in such a way that we are charging college students crippling rates of interest. We should be offering interest-free or at least tying interest from the federal government the same way that they loan to banks to prime, so that those are extremely low rates of interest, and investing in colleges so that they don't have to charge incredibly high tuition rates, so that right now so many of our students are graduating with such crippling debt that they can't start businesses, they can't afford their rent. That's something that I think we can all agree on.
Thank you.
Thank you. This one's pretty easy for me. I would have to say universal health care. Universal health care is something that is bipartisan across the board. And universal health care could be Medicare for all. It's single-payer health care. No matter what you call it, universal health care. More than 60% of Americans on either side of the aisle support the idea of universal health care because it is a human right. The reason that I think we could actually get this done is we need to elect candidates who are corporate-free, who do not have their pockets filled with money from Blue Cross Blue Shield and insurance companies. Healthcare is a human right.
Are there any Republicans in Congress right now that support universal health care?
There may not be Republicans in office, but that does not mean that Republican voters don't support universal health care,
right.
Especially working class Republican voters.
Thank you. What can pass in a bipartisan fashion?
I'm a bit bullish after the child tax credit expansion that the tax credit system is one where we can push more to keep, put money back in the pockets of Americans. I think we can do more on the child tax credit, lower the threshold, the income threshold to kind of loop more folks in, and also the earned income tax credit, which is a bipartisan route, and the renter's tax credit. And so I think the tax credit system, particularly those are refundable, so they put money back in the pockets of our constituents is important. I also think, Elex, permitting reform around deploying money that came out of the Inflation Reduction Act and the infrastructure bill would be important, and we could work together.
Okay, so this, as we head towards the end and sort of wrap up, I've done this before when I have this many candidates. It's hard for people to differentiate. So I want you to describe yourself or your campaign in one word that everybody can remember. One word. Start with you.
Representation.
Solutions.
Bold.
Minimalism.
Bold.
Aspirational.
They took bold. So I'll say pragmatic.
Okay.
Compound word, but people-powered.
Okay.
Fresh.
Kind.
Very nice. We do something. If we'll also now we'll go down the line. In one sentence, your final pitch. Why should people vote for you? Oh, sorry, council member. You're the only one who hasn't started off. One sentence. Why should people vote for you?
I'd love people to vote for me because I have a demonstrated record that is proven. If you love West Hollywood and you want to see West Hollywood replicated in success throughout the district, vote for me. I will bring representation to so many marginalized communities that have not had it, and I appreciate your vote. Thank you.
And hopefully not a lot of commas or semicolons in this sentence. Okay.
I'm an attorney. What can I say?
One sentence.
I'm Francesco Arreaga. I was born and raised in this district in a working class immigrant household with lived experiences, with the skill sets from law school at Berkeley and foreign policy, and I'll bring also the experience of working in Congress.
Thank you. And let's think more bumper sticker. Yes.
I've had enough. You've had enough. Enough is now or never.
Yes.
I want to build an America that works for everyone. I understand that we have this intersectionality of renters that are struggling. We want to make it better for homeowners that are struggling. I have served in a war, served in Iraq. I understand that firsthand experience of protecting our country. I've sworn to protect defend our Constitution. I want to also make sure that we feel safe here at home. We have a right to feel safe in public safety and champion a number of different issues as well as human rights. Thank you.
At this urgent moment, with so many crises converging, we need proven national leadership with the experience of tackling big issues and getting big things accomplished.
Assembly member.
Well, I have a proven track record of being effective, of addressing some of the biggest issues that we face as a state, issues like homelessness, like housing, like climate change, and that's the leadership I'll bring to the federal government.
My name is Maebe, and I hope that you will vote for me based off of my intersectional humanitarian platform based on economic equity and human rights.
Thank you.
It's time for a new generation of leadership to work across the aisle and get stuff done.
Thank you. You can see that in his ad. Yeah.
I lead from my values, and I understand it's not your name on the parking spot. It's what you do when you're blessed with the honor to serve to get things done.
Representation matters. I'm the one with the most federal experience and the lived experience to be able to actually deliver effectively for all of the diverse communities that are part of this district.
And finally, for those of you that have watched our political show, The Issue Is, which some of you have been on, we do something at the end of the show often called personal issues, where we do this rapid fire cultural favorites to get to know people a little bit. So this is one word answers, first thing that comes to mind. Let's have a little bit of fun. This has been so serious. Everybody's been so nice to each other. It's been very, very civil tonight. So we have a little bit of fun at the end. So we'll start with you and go down the line. You know, this is a Hollywood district, baby. Half of you have worked in Hollywood before. We got the Oscars coming. What is your favorite Oscar movie this year?
Barbie.
No, sorry, Mr. Arreaga, start with you, Mr. Arreaga. Go down the line.
There's many. But
Pick
I would
one.
have to-
You're voting for Best Picture. What are you voting for?
I will vote for. I'd probably go with Barbie too.
Yeah. Barbie, see some agreement there. Yeah. Barbie.
Barbie.
Yeah.
I think I'd have to go with it because that's the one I've seen. So,
Okay.
Oppenheimer.
Barbie all day long.
Yeah.
Hello, Barbie.
I'm a little biased because my wife cast Oppenheimer, so I have to go with Oppenheimer.
There we go.
And even though I'm going to go with the movie my daughter worked on, which is The Color Purple, which should,
very
in my
nice.
opinion.
We live in a Barbie's world. Barbie.
Close second.
Persian version, what else?
Okay. Now we're going to go this way. Start with you, council member. Favorite musical artist or band? Council member.
Dua Lipa.
My husband would kill me if I didn't say this. Beyonce.
Okay.
I'm from New Jersey, the boss.
Nice.
He
Bruce
played in my
Springsteen,
high
baby.
school gym in 1971.
Prince.
Nice.
It's Brittany.
Leonard Cohen.
Very nice.
Stevie Wonder. Don't you worry about a thing.
I have to go with Josh Groban. He's my single favorite, greatest artist.
Spice Girls.
Wow.
Olivia Rodrigo.
Okay. If now we'll go this way. If you had to recommend one restaurant in the district, what restaurant are you recommending?
Oh, I need to say two. There's two that I really love. Palms Thai. If you love Thai food, it's in the Hollywood area. It's delicious. And if you're into Italian, Palermo in Los Feliz.
Okay.
Damon's in Glendale.
Sashi Sushi in West Hollywood.
Gotta go with institution. Candors.
Okay.
Can I do two?
They did, sure.
Portos.
Yeah.
Come on. And I'd say Phoenicia. Come to Glendale.
Tacos Delta in Silver Lake.
Larchmont Wine and Cheese. I know the crowd too, but it also is my favorite.
I'm going to go old school, Smokehouse.
Nice.
I'm going to go old school too. Carousel Armenian is one of the first Armenian restaurants that opened up when Little Armenia started. And so, Carousel.
Rafi's Place in Glendale.
And final question, since this is Super Bowl weekend, and we're here on the Super Bowl weekend, what is your Super Bowl pick?
49ers. I grew up in Northern California.
Yeah.
Usher. Yeah, I'm watching, yeah.
I can't say Taylor Swift, but Andy Reid actually grew up in this district and went to Glendale Community College, and so I have a soft spot for Andy Reid, and so I'm
Go
going to
Chiefs.
pick.
You made that a
I'm gonna
local issue. Look
pick
at you.
The Chiefs.
That's a good politician.
Yeah, and he's also an LA Unified grad, so I'll go for the Chiefs as well.
I'm going to have to say Taylor Swift.
Okay.
A proposal to Taylor Swift.
Yeah.
I wish I could say the Rams, but the 49ers.
Okay.
As Detroit was my hometown, I was rooting for the Lions, but now I've got to go with Usher.
A breakup for Taylor Swift because we need a new album.
Finally.
49ers.
49ers is the last word. Thank you all for being here. Thank you all for being so
Thank you all very much.
respectful and kind. Hopefully, you all are a little more informed on your choices here. We encourage everybody to vote. Ballots are out now or going out this week. And make sure to vote by March 5th. And tell all your friends to vote by March 5th. There will be a video recording of this posted. I hope to post it to my YouTube page. I know they'll be posting it. So if your friends didn't get to be here, but you want them to be more educated about this, feel free to send the link out. I'll be posting it on social media too, so that people can be more educated about their choices.
And
it's so important that you go out and vote.
thank you all so much. I want to introduce my colleague, Lori Schechter, who's our current president of the Ebell. I want to thank Alex.
Thank
He
you.
didn't know about Levan Bakery.
Thank you.
It's also Valentine's Day. We want to thank Dre, who's one of our members.
Oh my gosh, look
and
at
these
this.
are
Thank you.
cookies from Levan Bakery for all of you
Look at that.
who came out. And I
share
just
with
want to
people.
thank all of you. I wish I had cookies for everybody, but next time. And I just want to thank everybody so much for participating, and I want to thank all of our amazing Ebell staff. This is what they're like. They're just incredible, and we're so happy to be in this wonderful space. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. Good job. Thank you. See, people like the person.